The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
I'm your darkest dream. They call me devil. My heart is empty. They call me devil, and you should be afraid.
Welcome, foolish mortals.
This show is based on true events. We may use audio, transcripts, and other media to show the true graphic nature of predators. For legal purposes, this is our research. We are not legal, mental, or medical professionals and do not claim to be. This show is meant to educate and create change on how we deal with predators and the survivors of their abuse. If you or someone else observes a crime or abuse, please seek help and report it. Some subjects may be disturbing to some individuals. You have been warned.
There's no turning back now.
Well, good evening. It is Friday, and between 10 to 11, you are listening to Betrayal on Armed Radio. Now, it is still October, you guys. October's halfway done. And did you guys look at the supermoon that was on Sunday, which was an orange, ginormous moon because it was closest to the planet Earth, which is what we live on. So, I unfortunately did not see it. It was cloudy outside, so I was not able to see it. I saw the moon the day before, which it was big, but it wasn't what you were going to see, which is that ginormous moon. And when you see a supermoon like that, it is so gorgeous. It's just a beautiful sight as it kind of rises up in the sky. And the best time to see it is when it's coming up, when the sun's setting and the moon is rising. And then as it goes through the sky, it kind of gets a little smaller and everything. But it's gorgeous when you get a chance to see that. But during the week when the storm clouds were coming through, it looked like it was perfect for Halloween, you guys. Perfect. The clouds were like wispy clouds, but they looked like they were in the shape of, two hands. They were kind of slowly being dragged across the moon. It's very cool. So since I'm a writer and everything, better description what it just said, but I think I'll actually use that, in a book. Sorry about that. Got a frog in my throat. But I was trying to come up with different little scenarios besides the normal standard, goobly gobbly things for Halloween. And so I like to watch the show, and it's going to be having its last season. Now they are kind of saying they might do another season of it, and the season 5 will come out next year. And of course, I'm waiting for possibly if there's a new season of Harlots, which I enjoy that show too. And I definitely know that Handmaid's Tale is going to do another season, so looking forward to catching up or to see the new season with that. But the show I'm referring to is called Lucifer. And it stars Tom Ellis, who plays Lucifer, aka the devil. And he's quite charming and handsome, and he's English, which is besides the southern accent, is one of the most, globally accepted as a sexy accent. And he's Welsh, so that accent is Welsh. And if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below, but I think he said it was Welsh accent. Could be wrong. But anyway, Tom Ellis, his parents, I believe, are parishioners, are pastors in a church, and he's playing the devil. But, you know, the English have a cheeky sense of humor and everything. So, they're cool with it. But he does a superbly good job at playing this Lucifer character. And then, of course, you have the other castmates who are equally as, awesome as, Tom Ellis's character, and equally as handsome or pretty and everything. But, it's kind of interesting to look at the dynamic of this show, and they just have some really good writers on it and really good direction on it. And of course, the actors play off of, let's just face the facts. If the actors couldn't successfully play off of each other, it would not be a good show. So, he could deliver a line, but if his other actors fall flat on their face, it's going to be a wasted line. So, they have to be equally as good, and also that chemistry and everything has to be there before the show to be, good, because you can have good lines and just have it on a wasted, cast of people who might not have a good chemistry. But this cast has a great chemistry, and they play off of each other quite well. And, sometimes I blank out and I can't think of people's names or their character names on there, but each and every one of them has, a great persona. Now, Mazikeen, which is, I guess, the devil's right hand woman. Usually it's a man, but this is a woman, which is great. And she is actually a demon. And of course, she's a badass. So she can kick butt and everything like that. And then there's this little girl named Trixie who is Chloe's daughter. And she is hysterical for her age. And everything that they have her doing, I'm just like, what are her actual parents thinking? And everything, which they had to be really cool parents, to have her daughter doing all that stuff, and good fun and everything. And then you have a Metadil who is an angel and everything, and basically they're the angels and everything are basically like brothers and sisters in heaven and everything like that. And of course, it's a great show. You should check it out. It is on Netflix, all the seasons. It was on Fox. But Fox, unfortunately, I don't know what Fox thinks. It's just like, oh, this show is popular, let's cancel it. So, and then Netflix picked it up. So, so if you see the hashtag Save Lucifer, it's, that devil, not the other devil. So I wanted to discuss, the origins of the devil, because there is a lot of information, and this is October, and we need to be discussing goobly goos and haunted houses and things like that. I think next weekend we might discuss the origins of Halloween. It's quite interesting. Or I might actually do, that movie, The Nun? It's based on real events, and there is actually a nunnery that you can stay at, that you could be visited by this nun who is pretty scary. Or I was thinking about doing Jack the Ripper or some other one. There's so many things. The actual Frankenstein, which is a truthful character. Just a lot of these things that we think are fake are based on real life events. Some are real life crime events. Some are just real life events. And I think if you stitch together body parts and you're stealing from cemeteries, that's a crime. So, I thought perhaps let's just do the devil today, because Halloween is called Hell Night, which if you talk to some evangelical and certain sects of evangelical Christians or some sects of Southern Baptists and things like that, they are like, oh heck no, I'm not celebrating Halloween. Halloween's for the devil. That's celebration of the devil. Well, I grew up celebrating Halloween. And for me, it's not about, celebrating the devil. It's a day of the year, or it's a month that, you can dress up and you could go to different fall events like carnivals and those kind of things, and then haunted houses. I like the Disney version of Halloween where it's not so scary. You carve pumpkins, you do have like the haunted mansion, but it's not like blood and guts. Some people like to watch blood and guts. I personally, I think they're boring. Slasher movies, I think, are boring. And it's boring and disgusting, and I just don't get it. I'd rather have a movie that has more of a plot line than just what I see in slasher movies. But that's my opinion, and if you like slasher movies, more power to you. I just don't go for them and everything. But I like the Haunted Mansion I've been to both, the one in Florida and the one in California. And, I remember when I went to the one in Florida, I was I was coming from the 5th grade into the 6th grade. It was during the summer. And I think it was probably in July. And I just know that I was scared because it was so realistic to me and everything. I was scared going through it because I was afraid of the dark and everything. Still have a little bit of trepidation for the dark, but not as badly as when I was younger. When I was a little kid, I was terrified of the dark because in the dark, that's when I would see, little, ghosts and everything that were in my house. And that's when they were most active. And it scared me because I was like, I don't want anything jumping out at me. And my elementary school would have carnivals every year where they would have like, a costume contest, and you would go to the different classrooms and they would have like a cakewalk, and they would have a makeshift haunted house, and they would, have little places where you can, buy crafts or make crafts. And it was a lot of fun, doing that. Now, I do know that some, to kind of circumvent not calling it Halloween, they call it a fall festival. And then the kids get dressed up and they go trunk or treat, where you trick or treat through people's trunks and everything. That's how they circumvent, calling it Halloween. But technically, you guys, it's Halloween. You guys are doing Halloween. A rose by any other name smells as sweet. So that's how they circumvent that, is that they don't call it a Halloween party. They call it a fall festival. But, yeah, and right now they're doing what is called the State Fair of Texas. And I've been to that. I've actually been to that on OU weekend, which was last weekend. And yes, OU won. And they won by a lot, actually. So, it really and truly, when you think about it, OU, the University of Oklahoma, wins pretty much 95% of the time. It's like occasionally Texas comes in and they win. But it seems like more and more, the University of Oklahoma just plows right through them. So that's a little bit of sports information there. But you guys, we have, besides this one, this is the 12th Friday. After this, there is 11 Fridays left of this year. 11 Fridays left. 10 in November and 10 in December. And I'm counting the 1st of January as part of December, but actually less than that.
I don't think you'll let us smoke in here.
Oh dear, what will become of me?
What's your name?
Lucifer.
Apple.
Exactly.
Goodness isn't a toy.
Well, the way I'm going to play with it is.
God has faith in all of us, even in our darkest moments. Why don't on you?
Because he didn't have faith in me.
Before the biblical God created the world, he first created the heavens, and inside the heavens, he created the cherubs, the angels, and the archangels. The archangels were essentially the highest rank of the angels, and were the chief messengers of God himself. Amongst these archangels was the being known as Lucifer, the highest archangel of all. He was described as being the most beautiful creature that God had ever created, a splendid being that was perfect in every way. Ezekiel 28:15 described Lucifer as, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created." But Lucifer was so perfect, so handsome, so divine, and so strong when in comparison to his peers that he grew arrogant. His superior qualities to God's other creations caused him to become prideful, and pretty soon he believed that it was he who should be in God's place. He wanted to be God himself, and given that he was deemed worthy to be in the presence of God more than any other, and that he arguably understood God better than any other, Lucifer could think of no one better than himself to be the one to overthrow his Lord. As noted in Isaiah 14:12-14, the prophet Isaiah quotes what some suggest is Lucifer, saying, "I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God." It can even be argued that Lucifer's ambition is greater than God's, that not only does he want to take God's place, but wants a place even higher than which God sits. Pride would spur on Lucifer to act on his thoughts, that he was indeed more powerful than God. It was pride in which blinded him, pride which led him down a path of haughtiness, and pride which saw him begin to manipulate the other angels into serving him. After all, his intellect was superior to that of the other angels, and so deceiving them was not beyond his means. While some did remain loyal to God, many of the angels who, like Lucifer, would become known as fallen angels, began to recognize him as the superior being. While Ezekiel 28:15 notes Lucifer as being perfect in every way, he also notes that iniquity was found in him, thus diminishing his perfection. With a third of the angels on side, Lucifer launched an attack on God, and a mighty war for the heavens took place. But Lucifer was not counting on the strong resistance put up by another archangel, the one known as Michael. Unable to defeat Michael in his current form, thus lending Lucifer to doubt his own perfection at this point, Lucifer transforms into a dragon, as noted in Revelation 12:7-8, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. While you might say Lucifer had the courage to rebel in the first place, although many would say this was not courage, and more so blind arrogance, he is ultimately defeated by Archangel Michael. By this, we understand how powerful the biblical God actually is, that Lucifer is defeated without God actually having to get involved in the battle. You might argue that God worked through Michael in order to overcome Lucifer, but in any case, Lucifer's defeat is absolute. Revelation 12:9 goes on to state, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, as he was cast out into earth, and his angels were cast out with him." This is also where we see Lucifer referred to by his other namesake Satan, which he earns after he has been defeated. His defeat is more than just a loss of pride though. Lucifer loses everything. He's not only shunned by God, but he is cast out from heaven, along with all the other angels who had sided with him. Gone are his glory days of being the most splendid, perfect being of all of God's creations, and instead, he takes the role of the complete opposite. His fall to earth is described by Luke, who quotes Jesus in 10:18, "I beheld Satan as lightning fell from heaven." Lucifer's ultimate fate is detailed in Revelation 20:10, where it's understood that the devil that deceived them was cast out into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night, forever and ever. It's understood though that Lucifer would not tolerate his sentence quietly. In fact, from the very day of him being cast out, Lucifer began to plot his revenge against God. Seeing as Lucifer was no longer God's favourite creation, Lucifer would target his vengeance against that which took his place, mankind itself. When God created Adam and Eve, he tested them, forbidding them from eating from the tree of knowledge. Seeing an opportunity to scorn God, Lucifer snuck his way into the Garden of Eden, posed as a snake. However, in the early passages of Genesis, which detail the temptation of Eve, the serpent is never explicitly stated as being Lucifer. In Genesis 3:1, the snake is merely described as being a crafty animal. Therefore, it's likely that the idea that Lucifer is this serpent is merely ascertained by the members of the faith. While it's taught as scripture, it's not necessarily stated in these opening passages. Some may counter this argument though, by saying that Lucifer is referred to as the serpent, most notably in Revelation 12:19, where he is called that old serpent, and perhaps therefore the original serpent. Others argue that Lucifer wasn't the snake itself in the Garden of Eden, but that he manipulated the snake to speak on his behalf. However, again, there is no scripture to actually support this. Furthermore, when we look at the origin of Lucifer's name, we'll find that Lucifer is actually Latin for light bringer or morning star, or even the planet Venus. But how could Latin find its way into a Hebrew manuscript when the manuscript was written before Latin was even a language? Let's take the 14th chapter of Isaiah to analyse this, seeing as, believe it or not, it's the only point in the scripture where the name Lucifer is actually explicitly mentioned. Isaiah 14:12 states, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cast to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit." Many believe that here, Isaiah is referring to Lucifer the devil, but there is another argument, that this passage is actually in reference to a fallen Babylonian king, one who is mortal, and not one who is created as a divine perfect angel. It's understood that this king had sinned greatly in his persecution of Israel, and likely believed that he was beyond the power and punishment of the biblical God. In this argument, Isaiah in this chapter seeks to explain the king's folly, and not the folly of the archangel Lucifer. In fact, his usage of the term Lucifer isn't universal across all translations. In some versions, Isaiah simply refers to the subject as the morning star, or Halel, the Hebrew word referring to Venus. It implies that the king of Babylon, whose identity is not confirmed in scripture, was once someone considered in high regard before his downfall, as predicted by Isaiah. But if this is the case, then how did it all become about Lucifer, the fallen angel? Well, that's not exactly known, but we can speculate that early Christian scribes, who were by this time writing in Latin, simply decided for themselves that this would be a great opportunity to fit in a story about a fallen angel. Going by this argument, Isaiah 14:12 was therefore hijacked by these scribes and moulded to fit their own narrative about the character Lucifer. By the time of King James I's translations into English, Saint Jerome, who was largely responsible for these translations, would incorporate Lucifer into the final version, and thus the metamorphosis of what was a Babylonian king who'd sinned for his arrogance would instead become Lucifer, the fallen angel of God. It would be interwoven into the biblical account of the fall, and would eventually become canon for some believers. The same can be said for Ezekiel's words in 28:15, where he states, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, until iniquity was found there." While there are many who believe that Ezekiel is addressing Lucifer, other accounts indicate that Ezekiel is actually referring to an unnamed mortal king of Tyre. In conclusion to this video, regardless of how you interpret the story of Lucifer, whether as an unnamed Babylonian king or the fallen angel of God, the moral of the tale is quite profound. It echoes the old saying, pride goes before a fall, or in the biblical sense in Proverbs 16:18, pride goeth before destruction, and haughty spirit before a fall. It serves to show us that, like Lucifer, if we are too confident and believe ourselves to be more powerful than we actually are, we could risk to set ourselves up for our own failure. The tale also seeks to teach us to be modest and to be thankful for what we have, and while we should aspire, we should not rush into things and be impulsive with our desires. It also echoes the idea that we should respect our elders, our parents, and those that paved the way before us, in that in some cases, they know better than we do and hold wisdom that we may not be able to conceive at the time. Lucifer, for example, believed he was stronger than God, and even though God had made him what he was, Lucifer threw it back in his face and went against him because he believed he was better. The result of this, of course, leads to Lucifer's banishment, which shows us that the consequences for such disrespect to those who came before us can and should be severe.
Well, that's certainly an interesting tale of the origins of the devil on there. It's definitely not like what you see on the television show or some of the other things that you see. And there's a quote that I put in a lot of my books, some of my books, especially my true crime books, is that, the devil doesn't come with pointy horns and a, pitchfork. He comes as everything you ever desired. And that's true. I mean, the devil's in the details of things. It's basically where you have an obsession over something. Basically, that's considered selling your soul to the devil because you're so obsessed with either money or fame or something like this to the point that you toss aside everything else. It reminds me of Batman when, Alfred tells Batman, if you kill the Joker, you've spent your whole life going after the Joker and destroying him, and you finally kill him, then what happens after that? It's basically you have no purpose after that, because you've lost yourself in the act of going after this one person, to destroy this one person. And it's a very poignant, saying. Of course, there is another saying from the movie which I find incredibly truthful, and that some people cannot be bought or reasoned with. Some people, they're not after any of that stuff. Sometimes some people are just wanting to watch the world burn. And if you think about that quote in itself, is that, there are people out there who enjoy destroying other things, another person, a community. They take pleasure in that. And what what Alfred was really actually describing is a sociopath. A sociopath, because they have put essentially into Pandora's box all their feelings and everything like that. They've closed it off, and they've replaced it to where they get pleasure by hurting people, by destroying people, by doing all these horrible things. They get pleasure from it. And we as a society, we can't wrap our heads around that, because we want to believe that people can feel empathy, remorse, and that people are held accountable for their actions. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And in many circumstances, the perpetrator is the one who gets away with it, who is not held accountable, who technically wins. And the victim is the one who is punished, who is, hurt. And that is something that we can't wrap our heads around. And we as a society, we don't want to be with what we call the losers in a battle. We want to be with the winners, even if they are, detestable people. We want to be with those, in a higher ranking. And that's why we shy away. That's why we ignore and vilify people who are victims, because it's a lot easier to be with the person who is doing the infliction of hurt than it is to be on the side of the person who's getting the hurt. And it reminds me of a poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, where it describes a road, splitting into two. One is a well-worn path, and one is a darker, not well-worn path. And you as a human being have a choice to go with the well-worn path or the one that is not so worn. And if you go on the well-worn path with everyone else, basically you follow the crowd, it's safe. It in a lot of cases, it's safe. There is no, anything out of place. But if you choose the path that is less traveled, you could run into danger. You could run into problems that you have to solve. But when you go to it and you reach the end, they find as though it was worth it in the end to go on the path less traveled. It was the path of adventure. It was a path of discovery. It was a path of, different things. Whereas the worn path was predictable and, there was no adventure. They observed your adventures. They just didn't participate in them. And, life is not a spectator sport. And you can watch your life pass you by, but you've got to get in there. You've got to get dirty. You've got to skin a knee, because you learn that doing something, it's like when we're kids. We learn that if we put our hands in the fire, it hurts. And some people continue to put their hands in the fire and they continue not to feel the pain. But the life of adventure, at the end of the day, you end up with scars and bruises and hurt and baggage, emotional baggage and trauma and things like that. But at the end of the day, you look back at all these wild and crazy things that you did, as opposed to a person who plotted the course and, just a simple straight line. My life has not been a straight line. It has been ups and downs and twists and turns and adventures and things that, people thought, oh gosh, you would never do that. And I did that on my own. And, it's one of those things. And I think going back to the devil story is that, when you study different religions, they have what is called a protagonist and an antagonist. And the devil has the label of being the antagonist, the person who agitates the protagonist, the hero, quote-unquote hero. And without these agitations in life, you don't grow as a human being. And if you ever watch the movie Legend, it has Tom Cruise in it, it has the unicorn and everything like that. And they talk about how darkness will always be around, because without darkness you cannot have light. And it's the balance. And that's what it is that Lucifer is the person who throws things off balance. And is absolutely, people are terrified in certain sects of the Christian faith because how it's drilled into their head about hell and burning and damnation and suffering and things like that, to the point where you have to stay on the path. If you think about this, and I didn't know about this, but fairy tales are actually cautionary tales of telling you, you know, the big bad wolf is in the forest. Stay to the path. You know, if you deviate from the path, the wolf is going to get you. What is it really saying to us is that follow the rules and don't deviate from the rules, because deviating from the rules is bad. And if you think back to like Elvis and the history repeats itself. It might be a different decade or something like that, but history always repeats itself. And this is what happens. You have where you're really, really loose, which means we're like, whatever you want, you know, you happen. Then all of a sudden, it starts to gradually start to become more and more conservative, and then it becomes ultra conservative. Think of the Victorian age. I mean, if you showed an ankle, that was like basically like showing your boob in public. If you showed your wrist, that's basically exposing your vagina in public. And then it starts to lessen up because people are like, I cannot live in a box that rigid. And then you get to the 1950s where you could not say the word toilet or toothpaste because that was considered a vulgar swear word. And then, of course, alcohol was considered outlawed. And then you had your ice cream socials. Then people rebelled against that by making, you know, bathtub gin and speakeasies and things like that. And then you start to get into the 60s where they had the sexual revolution and drugs and sex with everybody. It kind of, the sex portion went into the 70s. Then you got, you know, the AIDS was brought to the forefront, and people started getting scared about that, and kind of tightened up with that. And so it kind of goes in those waves where you're ultra conservative and then you start to loosen up. And we're kind of getting into that age where we're wanting to go back to ultra conservatism and remove different things because we're like, it's not safe, we gotta be safe. Well, in life, nothing is safe. You walk outside, an airplane can fall on your head. You go to work and something horrific can happen. Nothing is safe. But we have to label things because we like labels. So we call it evil, we call it demons, we call it things that we cannot explain. Are they good or they're bad? And when bad things happen to us, we have to give it a reason why. Why does bad things happen to good people? We have to give it a reason why. Because something evil happened. And truly, evil does exist, you guys. It does exist. But it's a choice. A sociopath chooses to hurt another person and take pleasure from that. They choose that because they are hurt themselves to the point that they want other people, instead of being able to articulate things, they cannot articulate to people, I am hurt. I hurt. So what they do is they hurt others because they want other people to feel what they feel. And then they discard them, you know, because they don't want to be held accountable for their actions, because that means that they have to address their hurt. So what they do is they hurt other people so that so that person feels what they're going through. But everyone experiences pain in different ways. So that is what happens. And so I think what happens is that the accumulation of the devil, the title the devil, is an accumulation, is a word for a person who is a psychotic, narcissistic sociopath. And it is those behaviors that we have coined in society as the devil, as evil, as a demonic state, because we have to label something, you know, light versus dark, dark versus light. But Does the devil truly exist? I know evil exists out there. Is it labeled? Is it a one person who is manipulating the world? I don't know if the persona exists, but I don't know if it's embodied in a entity that is doing all these things. I have no idea, because I am ignorant when it comes to that. I don't know for sure. As it was said in Interview with a Vampire, I've never seen an angel. Well, I've seen angels. I've never seen anything that proves something. I've seen ghosts. I have seen angels. I've seen angels 3 times. And if you've ever had an experience with an angel, it is truly awe-inspiring situation. I have seen evil. And I have, I have seen evil. And I've seen, things that look, I would say, demonic. I've seen ghosts. I've had encounters with ghosts. Ghosts at one time were people who were living. I heard my grandfather's voice 7 months after he passed away, when I passed my real estate test. As plain as you could hear. I could feel his hand on my shoulder. I could hear his voice in my head. As clear as day. He had been gone for 7 months. Could hear him. And there have been times that that's happened. I've seen my pets that have been deceased for a long time. I've seen their ghost. So there are things out there that are unexplained. I personally would not want to poke a rattlesnake, let alone poke at an entity that could be so vicious towards another person. But I also want to make a point that in the tarot cards there is a devil figure. And what that represents, if you look at the card, it has like this goat face with the pentagram, turned sideways, and it has his hand up and everything. But the 2 people, a man and a woman, they're chained to him. But if you look closer, as it describes in the card, the chain around their throat is loose to a point where they could, lift it over their head and be free. And they choose not to. So, and it's almost like the show Lucifer. They had an episode where Lucifer went down to hell because he had to go get some sort of formula to save Chloe's life, which he loves. And it was like a series of doors. Oh, if you ever read the play No Exit, there is a perfect example there too. But there was a series of doors, and when you walked into one door, you walked into somebody's version of hell. And they are reliving a traumatic experience over and over and over again. And there is a door, and they cannot, because of fear holds them rooted. Fear, guilt, hurt finds them rooted into a spot where they can't walk out the door, where they could easily just walk to the door and walk out and be free. But they live in torment for the rest of existence because they're held firmly rooted in this traumatic series of events. And in the play No Exit, you have these people who have died who are in a room with no doors. And hence the thing No Exit. And they're forced to live eternity in this place. Going back to my ramblings here is that, Shakespeare said that hell is empty and the devils are here. Which we truly create our own demons by our actions. we create some of our situations by our actions. Some of it's thrust upon us, some of it is through actions. If you smack a person and they smack you back, you've created the situation for you to counter, get the counter action there. And I think that, going back to the whole devil scheme of everything, is that perhaps, sometimes when we get in those ruts, we are placed in hell, and we have to crawl out of it. And, I personally have been through a hellacious, traumatic experience. And you find out who your friends are, you find out what you are made out of, because you have two situations in it when you're going through a horrific, traumatic experience. Sometimes it's a matter of hours, sometimes it's a matter of days, sometimes it's a matter of years. That it goes on for. And when you are trying to get away from it, you find that they try to pull you back in, pull you back in. And when you finally break free of that, and you have a time to where you can decompress, it's just, you have an awakening that is, it's kind of indescribable, and I guess it's a personal experience or something like that. But you start to realize certain things. When bad things happen to us, we can blow it off and say, oh, it's evil, it's the devil, it's this. But when you try to figure out the cause of it, I had dealings with a narcissistic psychotic sociopath. And it was a very traumatic experience. I had never experienced a person who had no feelings and no empathy or remorse and got pleasure from hurting people, from mostly hurting me and my family and other people. And I started seeing other people that this person hurt, and I was like, first, I wanted revenge. I wanted this person to be held accountable. I wanted revenge of that. And when I figured out that I was not going to get the revenge that I wanted, I was like, we have to understand what is going on. And so when I started peeling back the layers and I started understanding things, and I started understanding the mental issues of this person, I figured out that this person was technically more pathetic than they were evil. I started feeling empathy for this person who doesn't have the capacity to love, who doesn't have the capacity to truly feel emotions, who has this, and it's truly a sad state. And Harry Potter has it brilliant, with the line where, the people who live without love, is truly a sad case. I don't remember the line exactly, but it is truth to that. Is like, if you go through life and you don't feel, know what love feels like, and you don't understand what empathy is or anything like that, it's truly a hollow existence. If you cannot go out into your yard and see the beauty of nature, the beauty of the seasons, the beauty of different things, you're missing out. If you can't go to a museum and appreciate the beauty of artwork, you miss out. If you can't appreciate the beauty of, right now in Southern California, there's fires. Through that destruction, next year there'll be brand new growth. You might lose everything you have to gain what is really important in life, because you can't take it with you. So perhaps, in a way, the protagonist in all of this, aka the devil, is actually a vehicle to showcase our ugliness so that we can learn from it and learn how to, I don't know, it's a philosophical discussion about the devil and evil and good and all the other things. But, there are people out there who are going to still be your Osama bin Ladens, your Hitlers, your Jeffrey Dahmers, and all these people. They're going to be ugly, horrific people out there who do horrific, horrible things. It exists. Because goodness cannot exist without the balance of horribleness. And with that, I started researching Charles Manson. Because there was an audio of something that was quite interesting to me. And the more I'm researching on this, the more I'm thinking he might have been the scapegoat of Tex Watson's behavior. I'm thinking that Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Kernwinkle, all three of those together, who performed at least 2 noted, actually more than that, horrific events, had something inside of them that compelled them to do these horrific events. Because in the sense, at the end of the day, it was their choice. They chose. Because once they got to the house, they could have chose to stop what they were doing. They could have just, even if they had killed one person or in the process of killing one person, they could have chose to stop and left. One person might have died, 2 people might have died, 3 might have died, and 1 might have lived. But through their actions, they continued on. They had pleasure in hurting somebody else to the point where they died. And then the following day did it again. Ugh. It's horrific. But I'm thinking that Tex Watson used Charles Manson as an scapegoat for his bad behavior. Because he's a kid who grew up with, being the star athlete, being all these things, high above. Kind of like the Lucifer character, where he was, the best and the handsome and all these things. Perhaps he was trying to rise above by tearing other people down. Because it was said that he was the reason why they got into drugs. Because before they just smoked pot. And Tex Watson was the one who got them hooked on harder drugs. The LSD and things like that. And it was him who told the other 2 ladies. It was him who fired the first shot. And then started killing. And ordering the other ladies to kill. They could have said no. They could have said no. And I don't know. But it's all very interesting, topics there. But it's certainly hard for me to wrap my head around that Charles Manson could have a sliver of innocence. That he was just an ignorant person who got blamed for something. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that because I'm so used to the other, and that perhaps Vincent Bellosi, who was the prosecuting attorney, basically exploited a really horrendous event for his fame. Because remember, he was during the trial, he was writing the book, he did the movie that was released and got a lot of fame, money from those two, the book and the movie. When he had prosecuted other people before, but he didn't do that because it dealt with the celebrity. It gave him a vehicle to do that. I don't know. I'm still researching on this topic. I'm still researching on it. But these are some of the theories I had. And also the fact is that the caretaker who was allegedly there was not killed when quote unquote Manson gave the orders to kill everyone in the house, as gruesome as possible. And if they followed him blindly, they would have killed the caretaker. Why was he not killed? And all those other people were. The dogs, she had dogs. They would have been going crazy. I've got little dogs. If there is a suspicious leaf in the backyard, I guarantee you they're going to be barking up a storm. I don't know. More questions, but I believe we are out of time. So next week, I think I'm going to do haunted schools. And I've got a book called Haunt You on Amazon right now that deals with haunted schools. There are a lot of haunted schools out there, you guys. So next week, we're going to deal with haunted. It's our last show for October, and then it's November time. So be safe out there and have a great week. Bye-bye now.
Whenever you're faced with a choice, ask yourself the question, WWLD. What would Lucifer do?
Make me your part.